Yeah, how many clients are you representing as of this recording?
Oh, around 50 maybe. But it's really, it's not that I have 50 who are actively working on things now, or some are, that because I'm always worried to say a number because that makes me sound like I don't have time for any of my clients. But I kind of like to think of it as kind of like, I don't know, some dominoes or a little wind up toy, and I get one going in the right direction, and then I start the next one's going, and then I look back over and this one needs another little help, and so I get that one going as well. So not everyone is, although I will have, there are times definitely when everyone has decided to send me their manuscripts all at once, my clients, and then I've got a lot of work to do. Um, but yeah, again, having a nice balance of some novelists who are kind of going away to write their novels and then coming back versus picture book people who have a more steady stream of books that they're working on versus illustrators. I do encourage all of my illustrators to write as well. One of my clients said that I forced her to write. I did not force her to write. I may have strongly encouraged her to write, but I also then sold some of her books, so I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. But I definitely have illustrators who are, in addition to writing their stuff, illustrating other people's work. So then that's a different kind of work that I'm doing for them.
Gotcha. So 50-ish clients as of this recording. How actively are you still seeking clients? How many more how many is it likely that you might sign over a given year?
I probably sign an average maybe 2 a year, and I have already signed 2 this year, but it's not, again, it really needs to be a client that I feel that I just physically cannot live without representing this text or this artist. So for example, somebody I signed in January, I had actually read their book like last spring, and I just kept thinking about it and yeah, going back and reading it. And when I would go back and read it, I felt the same way about it as I read it the first time. So those kind of projects that I just feel like I cannot live without are the ones that I would have to sign.
Does that happen pretty frequently where you send somebody a very polite rejection, like, I wish I could take this, and then you keep thinking about it, like, did you find anybody? I hope you didn't find anybody. I want it after all.
Well, that particular, no, I usually don't reject them then. I just sit on it. Or if they'll get back, if they follow up with me, I might say, oh, I'm thinking about it still. There were 2 clients that I took on from the Julie Headland's 12 by 12 picture book challenge that I had read. I think I read manuscripts for her in like maybe March 2019, maybe before that. And there were 2 that had stuck out to me. And I think I'd asked for more work, and I just kind of thought about them. And again, I just kept thinking about them. And so then March 2020, it's the start of the pandemic, and I felt like I needed to shake things up a bit. And I had a little bit more time to take on some new people, because a lot of people were not writing then. And also we were at my parents' house, and I feel like I had tons of free time because my mom, who was a teacher, would help my kids with the school, and she's retired now. And then in the evening, they would go to my sister's house. So I was actually able to do like more during the pandemic. So I call these 2 my COVID clients, because I just really, you need something, a little spark of joy or whatever during the pandemic. So because I kept thinking about their work, I wrote to them, I'm like, can you send me more? This one particular poet, Susie Levinson, I said, okay, can you, send me more? And then she sent me this manuscript called Pantaloons, Poems About Animals and Pants. And I was like, boom, done. I have to, like, I have to sign her up. And especially there's different litmus tests kind of I have for myself, right? Like if I can't stop talking about the project to other people, and I can't stop reading it aloud to my family, like that's a good sign. So yeah, so I took on Susie as a client, and so I ended up selling the Poems About Animals and Pants book to Cameron Books, which is coming out 2 years, maybe something around then. Yes. And then the other client, Tasha Hilderman, I also signed her up and then sold another book, not that book, but a different book that she sent me down the line. So
does it often happen that you're reading passages of books or submissions out loud to your family, but then it's still a pass?
Yeah, occasionally, but I feel like usually if I'm super passionate about something, and I mean, sometimes I read stuff aloud to them and they're like, like that's not very good, but often they will like it. And they do get involved with helping me with projects. Sometimes they'll give me advice, solicited or not. And like the one example I like to give, I don't know if you've heard this before, but Mike Ciccatello, who's one of my author illustrators, he had a book about he had this picture book dummy, and I'd made the mistake of printing it out and putting it on the kitchen table. And then of course, one by one, my family looks at it and they're like, what? Like, what's going on with this story? So we actually had over dinner this family discussion about what could happen with this story. And I passed along the feedback to Mike, and he totally went with it, and we ended up selling the book, and it's Beach Toys versus School Supplies. And there's a scene in the book where the school supplies build, the whole idea is they're having this sandcastle building contest. And I like to push my clients in terms of thinking, what is because there's so much predictability in picture books, and I want them to push them to think, what is the least likely thing that you think will happen, but is still within the realm of plausibility? So we decided you kind of expect that the Beach Toys would win the contest. So I'm like, what if the school supplies win? So the school supplies build, and I was trying to encourage Mike to make it some like Taj Mahal type building, something really fancy. And my daughter just looks at me, she's like, what should be a school? I'm like, yeah, it probably should be a school. So anyway, I told Mike, and he went with it, and it's a school. And so my daughter is very proud now. Anytime she sees that spread, she's all like, yeah, that was me. Yeah, so she's my harshest critic for sure. One of my clients, she'll send me some stuff and I'll tell her my thoughts, and then she'll say, well, what did Amelia say? And I'm like, well, this is what Amelia said. But she does have some, she's only 11, but she does have some good astute comments to make. So yeah.
One reason not to send you overly dark things is because how are you going to get the family involved?
I know, or yeah, kind of shield her away from it. Yeah. I don't know.
I'm assuming most of your authors are charmed by this and not mortified that you're talking about their manuscript.
Right. No, definitely. I mean, if they were, I would not do that. But no, a lot of them, I mean, a lot of my clients are relatively local, and I've met them and they've met my kids, or even if they're not local, a lot of them I've still met at conferences or et cetera. And so yeah, the problem is my kids think they're friends with them. I'm like, no. When my son got a phone, he's like, oh, can I put this client's number in there? I'm like, no, that's crossing a line somehow. I feel like that's slightly unprofessional. The client's like, I don't mind. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. But no, it is helpful to get there. It's just always helpful to get a fresh eye. And I feel like I've somehow, for better or worse, trained them. Like my daughter even loves going through picture books and thinking about pagination and things like this that most kids probably don't sit around thinking about. But yeah, so it's helpful. I might think something's funny, but I'm like, is this really funny? And so it's helpful to have a slightly willing audience to bounce ideas off of. And my husband, he had studied illustration at Syracuse in college. So he's helpful for if I have questions about some of my illustrators, because I feel that I have a decent picture book background, especially working with Barbara Lalicki, who worked with some amazing people at Harper. But I don't have an art background per se. I cannot draw to save my life. I do not understand perspective. In fact, we've been playing this game recently, Telestrations, where you draw a picture on this whiteboard and you pass it to the next person. And everyone makes fun of me because like my husband's illustrations look actually what they're supposed to look like. And when I draw something, not so much, like the cookie, if it's a cookie jar, I'll draw the cookies so they're all stacked like this on top of each other because I don't know how to draw the perspective. So he's always very helpful if I show him a sketch and I'll say, I feel like it's not working, but I'm not sure why. Or, oh, what do you think of this possible new artist? Or, just two different versions of a color piece. Which do you think is stronger? Just because I've looked at it so much at that point and I can't tell anymore. So, yeah. So again, and it's not, at the end of the day, obviously I'm the one making the decision if I want to take on a new client, or obviously the suggestions I pass along to the authors and illustrators. At the end of the day, right? It's their book. My name's not on it. It's up to them. But it's just useful to get somewhat educated feedback here. So.
Well, I know you said elsewhere that you're looking for clients that you can create some sort of personal connection with. And so when I see that, I always wonder, like, what's the line between trying to be open to making a personal connection with an agent and coming off as really creepy and not at all business professional? And then I assume that also plays into how you evaluate somebody as a potential client. Is, hey, at some point you may get feedback from my child. Are you somebody, if you call the house, are you somebody that I would be comfortable with saying hello to whatever child answers the phone?
So what was the question exactly?
The question is just how if you're looking at an author as somebody you want to make a personal connection with, how can an author go about making themselves personal connectionable? that's a phrase I'm going to invent for this.
I think just completely being themselves, unless the version of themselves is completely crazy, then maybe not being themselves. But I think just being natural and knowing, like, I'm just a person, right? Like, yes, I'm a literary agent who happens to know editors and can get your book published, but like really at the end of the day, like I'm just a person like they are. And I love people I can connect with and just be able to chat naturally without feeling forced. I think a lot of times at conferences, sometimes writers will try too hard or won't try at all, but just people who are just kind of acting naturally and can just have a normal, natural conversation are great. And I shouldn't also stress too much. One thing I really love about this business is everyone, all of my relationships with my clients are different. So it's not like, oh, I have to have this super close, personal, warm, fuzzy relationship with every client. If they are someone who doesn't want that, then that's fine too. Like, and I love knowing, everybody communicates differently, for example, right? So I have some people who are big phone chatters and some people who will text and some people who will email first thing in the morning and some people who email first, like late into the night. And so I just find that really interesting, actually. And when potential clients will ask me how I work, I said, well, I will work however you work. That's, that I find is most important and just most productive as well. Yeah. So in general, I really enjoy people. I find them fascinating. And so that's one thing I really enjoy about this line of work.